This is the Wealth Standard Radio, your gold standard in everything financial.
Hey everyone, this is Patrick Donohoe. Welcome to the Wealth Standard Radio. We are on episode 173. And, for the last couple months, I was like, all right, my funnest podcasts have been with this guy that's sitting in front of me.
Hey, man.
And what's going on? What's going on,
I'm interrupting
Chunga?
you again.
It's okay.
It's my new thing.
That you're more than welcome to interrupt me anytime you wish.
I thank you for having me back.
Yeah.
First of all,
This is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun one.
It's fun for me because you're looking very tan.
Well, yeah.
And very well rested.
Well, I don't know about the last statement, but the first statement, I'm tan, but rested. Yeah, we were down. My wife's from Mexico. We were down in Mexico.
Yeah.
For a yearly visit to her family, and it was timely. It was during the election, so.
No way.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay, so none of this matters now. You're in Mexico during the election.
Yeah.
The election of Donald Trump. You were in Mexico.
Yeah, I was actually kind of scared when I was after it all went down.
Terrified.
Yeah, because I didn't I was like Trump's not going to win, Hillary's going to win. It's all good. But then like my anxiety level started to build because my daughter's 12th birthday was the night of the election. So at the hotel, we had this like little room and all of our cousins were there. And it was right outside of the lobby.
Were you even keeping track?
Well, no. So it was right outside the lobby. In the lobby, there's this huge TV there. And like everyone was surrounding the TV and looking at the results. And people were like in shock and gasping. And it's like, I'm like, oh, crap. I hope I don't get accosted.
Did you, what did you do? Did it change your behavior in any way?
Did it change my behavior? No, I paid attention to the environment. I paid attention to what's going on. I was like,
I'm okay.
It's good. And my brother-in-law he's a boxer. So
okay.
You're
a former hockey player.
And
you can throw down.
I can hold my own, right?
Sure.
And so that combination, I felt pretty secure.
Okay. All right.
But the next day, I had to go to a conference in Florida. So I left Mexico early and flew from the capital Sonora to Mexico City. Okay. And that is where I had a little bit more anxiety.
What happened?
Well, no, that's how I went to Florida. But so I had something else happen. And now this was interesting because we usually drive through Nogales, which is the border town of Mexico,
right, which is
and Arizona.
You told me that before you left, and I thought, okay, Patrick's insane.
Well,
driving through Nogales.
Yeah, I've done that a million times.
As an American, that's probably pretty dangerous, is it not, to be driving through Nogales?
Yeah, we've done it for years, and have never had issues. We always drive during the day. And
how's your Spanish?
I think this go around it was somewhat rusty. But so that made itself evident when when you drive through, there's not as much. There's zero scrutiny. There's like a red light, green light. And it's all random. So if you're driving through, and we get green lights all the time, right?
Sure.
So if you're stopped, then that's where immigration will ask you questions or whatever.
Right.
The Mexican immigration.
Yeah.
But if it's green, you just drive straight through.
You're good.
We drove straight through. But when I got to Mexico City, when you're flying outside of Mexico, you're supposed to have papers that say when you came in, when you left, and they have to be stamped and verified.
You drove in and now you're flying out.
And I didn't get my papers when I crossed into Nogales. So here I am, I'm trying to convince the airline and then immigration,
the federales,
then the immigration. And I was on the brink of saying, listen, I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote. I swear, just give me, stamp my paper.
Well, honestly though, were you a little worried when they're in there and they're kind of giving you the what for about your papers? Were you thinking Trump did this?
Yeah, I was observing, right? Because it was in the back of my mind. But it was one of those things where I think it was early in the morning. People were still kind of in shock. But I had to, I missed my flight, had to reschedule and rebook.
Oh,
but
you did?
But there was another flight, and I made it, that night or whatever.
You made it without incident.
Yep. So my Spanish definitely got put to the test there.
I would say so.
I got stamped. It was interesting.
And it was okay.
It was good. I'm alive. I made it back to the United States.
I got to tell you, that would be one of the last places on the planet I'd want to be when Trump got elected.
You're 6'3", and you stand out. I'm I'm just a normal guy just walking through, and
Yeah. Well, 6'5", but who's keeping track? Who's keeping track?
I say 6'3" because we're used to being around Andy Tanner, who's like 6'15".
He's 6'9", isn't he? Yeah, just crazy. Andy Tanner, good dude. So, I'm glad you're back.
Yep. Yeah.
And I was really, really excited to get you back because, I'm watching the election coverage and I'm thinking, I bet Pat's dying in Mexico right now. But I can't wait to talk to him and hop on the Well Standard Radio because we had done a podcast a couple of weeks ago about what would happen if Trump won and what would happen, just kind of reading the tea leaves if Hillary won. And here we are. So now, I guess, for lack of a better term, this would be the follow-up episode to how this impacts, or based on you, the economic wonder kid that you are. I say kid because he's a little younger. But this is one of the world's foremost economic finance experts in Patrick Donohoe. And I would love to know what you think the impact is going to be now. What happens now with Trump as president?
Well, I'll take kind of a short step back and say that I'm a huge proponent. It really excites me when there's disruption, when things happen that people are not prepared for, because that's when you start to see kind of the human element in what happens. And right now, it is prevalent throughout the entire world.
Well, people are scared.
They are, and it also is when an expectation, right? Because most people assumed Hillary.
I think everybody did.
They did. And they just could not fathom what would happen. So it's kind of this, like, they're in this place of what's going to happen? There's so much uncertainty. And what happens when people are uncertain? They're not acting logical, right?
No.
They're acting irrational. And that's what you're seeing right now throughout the entire world. And that's what I have found insanely interesting as far as like what to talk about here, because I think there is going to be a lot of that. I think he is going to be a very disruptive president, but I think that's a good thing, because when there's disruption, that is when things change. That's when there's a challenge. That's when human beings really get there. They kick into gear and start to create solutions.
Well, and it really is a tale as old as time, especially when you have an outgoing two-term president. Change is always the cornerstone of any campaign when you've got a two-termer that's leaving. But in this particular instance, I think you're going to get more change than possibly at any other point. I was really young when Reagan was elected, but I do remember that there was a lot of similarities when Reagan was elected to now. There were a lot of people that said, well, who is this guy? He's an actor. I don't know what he knows about government. He's a former far left guy. There are some parallels between Trump and Reagan. And I know that back then a lot of people were very scared. It's easy now to look at this and go, well, Reagan was by all accounts a great president and was largely beloved by the American people. And Trump is nowhere close to that. But that's not to say that he won't be given the chance to govern. I do know that with college kids, millennials, young millennials, I expected the reaction that is happening right now with the protests and where social agenda has been the cornerstone of the Obama administration, where everything's social. Now you have somebody that's focusing less on social issues and more on business and infrastructure and immigration. Well, that's a social issue, but I expected this fear. But what is surprising me is the fear that's happening outside of the colleges. Well, there's a lot of it.
There is, and I would say, and as we were kind of prepping for the podcast, it's one of those things where, I looked at everything that occurred, and I looked at, what's going to happen in the future, and I concluded two things. Number one, an answer to the question, what's going to happen?
Right. Okay.
And then second is, what do you do about it? So I think the answer to the question is, what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? We never know. You can speculate. There's always conjecture, but in the end, it's really, who knows what's going to happen? Look at the night before the election. Okay, the Dow futures were 1,000 points off.
Right.
But then the next day, completely rebound up.
You mean as the election was happening?
Yeah. So futures totally tanked, and then the next day, right, you had this massive exodus from the bond market, right, and the bond market, was inflated as it is. And suddenly people just started pushing more money into equities.
This is. I'm glad you brought this up because when it comes to bonds and stuff in that area of finance, I'm an idiot. I'm the biggest dumb guy ever. So I can play the role of people who may be listening to the Wealth Standard Radio now who just don't know this market. Can you give us a rundown for the people like myself who may not know why this is so important?
Okay.
The bond market particularly.
So the bond market, a bond, all it is a loan. right? And so
a loan
you
from
have
the government. It's
well,
it's
you
a
have
loan to the government from you, right?
Well, you have two. Well, there's two aspects. You have the government side of things, but you also have the corporate side of things,
Okay,
right? So the
okay.
government side of things is like the A-rated, very highly liquid, massive market, and this is typically
Okay.
traded by institutions and governments around the world.
Okay.
Right, where you have basically treasuries, which are some short-term stuff, then you have notes, which are medium-term, then you have bonds, which are 30 years. So all it is,
Right.
like the benchmark right in the middle is the 10-year note, and it's basically a 10-year bond where the government issues a bond and they pay a certain amount of interest associated with it. And there's a pricing associated with it, which is at par, which would be, like a 4% bond or 3% bond.
Okay.
But then
over 10 years.
Yeah, over 10 years. And that's
Okay.
just a straight interest payment if you keep the bond.
Okay,
But
so
you can-
these
but you
bonds
can
are not
sell it.
not unlike the bonds that my grandma gave me on my birthday, where it's like you're getting a $5 bond, and in 30 years it might be worth $8.
But most people don't keep it for
Okay.
30 years. They don't keep
Okay.
it for 10 years. Okay, it's very liquid because somebody else is willing to buy it. Okay?
Okay.
Now, the pricing of that bond is based on supply and demand, right?
Okay,
So
sure.
if there is a high amount of demand, what happens to the price of that bond? The price goes up, right? A lot of people are requesting it. They can now bid the price up.
Okay.
Okay. If
Okay.
there's no demand for it, price goes down. Now, the interest rate stays the same at par. Okay. But if the price goes up, now you're paying more for the same interest rate, which means the effective interest rate is going to go down.
Okay.
Okay. But
Okay.
if there is a sell-off, which means everybody's selling,
They panic.
people panic, right? The price plummets,
And that's
now
what
you could have a
happened.
subpar pricing, which means that even though the bond is at 3%, because you paid less for it than par,
Right.
your yield goes up, right? So basically, the bond market, from a treasury and a corporate side of things, tanked,
Yeah.
right? And so basically,
Has that recovered?
no, I mean, it's still,
I've kept track of the futures and the
Yeah, it's
Dow
still-
and the Nasdaq, but
Yeah, and I don't follow markets that closely either.
Right.
But typically, you have this kind of relationship between bonds and equities, which is, right, when people are optimistic about the future of the economy, they'll take money out of bonds and
Okay.
put them into the market in equities.
Okay.
And that's what grows the stock market. That's why stock markets are hitting like all-time highs now.
well, that's
right?
what I've noticed is since the morning after all the once the shock wore off, I think we've had at present, as of the time of this recording, we've had 3 days, if I'm not mistaken, of record high closings.
Yeah. No,
So-
and here's the deal. It's like, so if you go and read Michael Lewis's book Flash Boys, right? So Michael Lewis wrote The Blind Side.
We'll put that in the
and-
show notes so
Yeah.
that everybody can get it.
And it's in Flash Boys, it talks about the high frequency traders. So a lot of these trades sometimes are not just like people waking up one morning and say, "Oh, I'm optimistic about the economy. I'm going to take money on my bonds and put it into equities." No, it's computers that are basically triggered to say, "Okay, when certain price levels hit here, we're going to go
here.
here."
Hits here.
And so that's and here goes the initial question that I asked, which is, what's going to happen? Nobody knows, right? And
Well,
that's
yeah.
and that's what I would be prepared for, right? If you assume a specific outcome and you're disappointed, I would say the worst thing to do is to be caught up in the emotions behind your disappointment. Okay, I would say
Don't knee jerk.
Yeah, and that's where I was talking to you before the show about this concept, which I think is going to bridge between what's going on and then what do you do.
Yeah.
Which is the OODA Loop, right? And
Now this
a-
is crazy. I've
You
never
never heard- yeah.
I've never heard this. I'm a bit of a military aficionado, and that's where this came out of. I guess he's a fighter pilot.
Yep. So John Boyd was
John Boyd,
a
that's
Vietnam fighter pilot. Okay, and he was the best dog fighter at the time, and he used this concept, which he later bridged into kind of a business idea, which is this OODA loop of decision making and
OODA loop.
and it's like it's a feedback loop, right? So OODA is an acronym, stands for observe is the first thing, which is you observe what's going on around me.
Okay.
Then you orient yourself. Where am I in relation to what's going on around me?
Observe,
Then you
orient.
make a decision.
Decision.
Okay. And when you make that decision, you don't think about the decision. You make it and then you act. Okay.
Oh,
and
I
then
love
when
this.
you act, you then go loop back around again to the observe.
And the process just
and you
continues
just keep
repeating
so it's
itself.
small decisions over and over and over and over again.
OODA loop.
But the thing is, it's like when you look at just kind of what's going on right now. I mean, we're in unprecedented times, right? So if you observe what's going on in our lives,
Yeah.
right, and we talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast, but
Right.
you have this fiscal situation that is a wreck,
Yeah.
right? That is being inherited by Trump. Now you
Right.
go back to Reagan, and that's right after you had some of
Jimmy
the
Carter.
the hype.
Yeah.
You had high inflation. Paul Volcker, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve at the time, came in and spiked interest rates. Right now,
Yeah.
at that time, that was possible. Now it would collapse the entire world
Right.
economy if something
Right.
like that happened. Okay, but we won't get into kind of the monetary policy side of
Okay.
things. But you have you have $20 trillion of debt. You have $500 million of deficit spending. You
Oh
have,
my gosh.
You have I think 40 plus million people in poverty. You have
Food stamps.
150 million people that have some sort of government aid,
Yeah.
food stamps, student loan debt. You have wages that have stayed stagnant for 30 years.
I was listening to, I can't remember. I even made a note. Don't you hate that when you're doing a podcast? I can't remember where I heard this, but I have heard that comparatively, income versus cost of living predates 1975.
Yeah. Yep.
That's how bad the economy truly is. And a lot of people are kind of glossing that over. But really, income versus cost of living is below the levels of 1975.
Yeah, it's in. So that's where we're at, and medium home prices are continuing to go up. Stock markets are at all-time high, and then you have that being inherited by the Donald. Now, obviously, he's had experience in business,
Right.
But who knows what he's going to do, and who knows what Congress is going to link up to him and do. I mean, we don't know, and that's
it's a
why.
weird thing because I feel like I totally understand why some people are scared.
Yeah.
Why? Well, not some people. A lot of people are scared. But I also look at this and go, yeah, it's scary. But man, what a cool time! What a cool time in our history to just watch what happens.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it, and that's where again the detachment that I think is almost, to be sane in this day and age, you have to be detached from certain activities.
Is that why I'm looking at this going, oh, this is kind of cool?
It is, and that's why I think you look at the college level that are like their professors are canceling class and postponing midterms.
Yeah.
It's insane, right? Because they have
And now
not
they're talking
had,
about sanctuary campuses now
yeah,
too.
I mean they've not had anything disruptive happen to them most likely throughout their entire life. There's been there's been wars, but there's never been a draft. They've had the same president, right, for the last several years.
They've had a decade of social agenda. They don't know anything else.
Exactly. And now you have this guy that comes in and talks the complete opposite to it.
Right.
Right. Whether it's logical or not, because it's different.
It's fear.
That's where they're like, oh, what do I do? And that's the importance of detaching from what's going on and observing as objectively as possible.
Right. Okay.
Observe what's going on. Now, you have all the data that we just mentioned, plus a crap load more of it.
Right.
Then you have what the proposed congressional agendas are. Then you have the Donald's proposed agenda topics, right? Which he did his 100-day promise or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
So it's like,
I don't know, man.
It's going to be fascinating, and then you have all sorts of other things that are going on in the world. I mean, we're a world economy, and also you have this unprecedented growth in technology. I mean, Elon Musk came out with his solar paneled roof. You have I was at a conference when I was going to Florida.
Yeah, the Palm Beach.
Yeah, Palm Beach Research Group, and there was a conference, and there's this guy. It was fascinating. He was talking about just some biotech and medical innovations that are happening, which could prolong life. I mean, there's so much that's going on. If you attach yourself to one thing, it's just not going to end pretty. It's not going to end well.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think just really understanding this very simple concept of the OODA Loop has helped me. I mean, I learned about this a few years ago from some business coaches.
Right.
And it's really just like you have to detach yourself from outcomes, because there's all sorts of variables that can change that outcome. I mean, so that's the thing with Hillary. I mean, we were talking about this before. It's Hillary and the Donald. It's like, you had Donald, I had Hillary in the back. Now, I didn't vote for her. I didn't vote for Donald either. I voted for Gary Johnson. But I had her in the back because I'm like, she's connected. I mean, she has this huge foundation. I'm like, man, she has the back. But it was, these like black swans, the WikiLeaks, her getting a picture taken of her stumbling into the car. You had
all these intangibles.
The Anthony Weiner thing, right? It didn't matter what was on his server. Once the connection was made between her and Weiner, over.
I think that when you factor in a lot of the I call them the flyover states, and forgive me, I don't mean that to sound demeaning in any way, because you've got a lot of very liberal ideologies on both coasts. But in the flyover states, you have a lot of people that were greatly affected by an environmentalist agenda and social agendas, and they're hungry. And I think that was a huge factor in this. But you're absolutely right. When you have Anthony Weiner coming back from the dead, when I saw that happen, I went, it's over.
Oh yeah,
it's all the way over. And you're right. I do have a background in political consulting, and so I think the only person in the office that said, I think Trump's actually going to eke this out.
Yeah.
And people thought I was crazy.
And that's the thing. And I don't. And with me, it's like I don't care if Hillary won, fine. If Donald won, fine. Because those are just things that I don't have really any control over, or not even really influence over. But I do. I can observe what's going on. I can orient myself. I can make decisions and just keep going through that loop.
You were very detached. And if you go back and you listen to it, might be fun for people that are listening now to go find that episode of the Well Standard Radio. Go back in time a couple of weeks. Because Patrick is so detached. He said, look, I think either way we win. If Hillary wins, she's going to destroy the economy. She's going to absolutely crash it, in which case we get to rebuild everything and life is going to be good. If Donald takes over, he's going to have some very different ideas, and it will probably not crash the economy, but boost it even further.
Yeah, and who knows? And that may be the case, but we may be so far gone it might not be the case, because looking at some of his tax plans, it's just like, okay, well, you always, as far as coming up with those type of policies, you're creating idea in hopes of a certain outcome.
Sure.
But what do you never pay attention to? You never pay attention to what's called the unintended consequence, which are these black swan events.
Yeah.
Okay, because you
Anthony
make a decision.
Weiner.
Yeah, it's like,
oh my gosh.
Seriously, it's like you make a decision to have a server, right, and to give access to your email address to this person or that person. And it's like you do it because, okay, that makes sense. I can leverage my time and I can have them do it instead of me having to do it, so I can focus on other things.
Right.
But what's the unintended consequences? Those emails wind up on some guys. So anyway, it's just like you can never prepare for every single consequence that will be the result of your decision. Okay, what you can prepare for is just really making decisions quickly, not getting attached to outcomes.
Okay, so the detachment would be part of the observation. I guess the first O in the OODA loop, right?
Is observe.
Is observe.
Yep.
Okay, so observe, and that would be, in order to do that correctly, you have to detach.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
if you're attached, then your observe is going to be tainted and biased
through a certain filter.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like a dogfight, right? In Vietnam, if you think that he's on your right and you don't like look back every 30 seconds and you just assume that he's there, he may be on your left and shoot you down.
In your beat.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like making quick decisions and observing and over and over again.
Okay, so the next O would be
orient.
Observe, orient,
which is associate, where you are, your business, your investments, your retirement, your employment,
how do I factor in with what I'm saying?
Where do I stand in relation to what's going on around me?
Okay, all right. Well, that seems pretty self-explanatory.
And then you make a decision. You make a decision, and it might be right, it might be wrong.
Go right, go left, but whatever you do, do something.
Do something, and then you make a decision to do something, then do it, and then observe again, and see, was it right, was it wrong? It's kind of like a plane taking off. When the plane takes off runway, I mean, you don't know exactly what the wind is going to be or the weather is going to be. You don't know it, and the pilots don't know any of that.
You have to compensate.
What are they doing? They're always looking for, okay, well, if the wind is that way, I'll do this. If that works, doesn't work. It's that constant, those constant course corrections. And I think that, it will do, because of how fast life is going right now, it is, I mean, logically for me, it may not work for everybody else, but for me at least, it helps create some semblance of sanity, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that if I detach myself, unemotionally get away from whatever the outcome is, I can make a different decision and hopefully learn a lesson, overcome a challenge, and then hopefully get to, kind of my vision, my overall long-term vision in a different way. As long as I get there, I don't care. The path that it takes, it could be this way, it could be that way.
I think I speak for not only myself, but for a lot of people that are listening to this podcast right now. I'm a little disappointed in myself, actually, that I've made it this far into my life without ever even hearing of the OODA Loop, because it's so simple. It's the most basic. It's one of those, I guess the root of every great invention is when you come up with something and people go, well, why didn't that exist forever ago?
Yeah. Well,
that's how this is for me right now.
Well, it's the whole, I heard a quote, and I think we mentioned this a few weeks ago, but I heard a quote that's basically the information that's created in one day, the new information that's created in one day would take a lifetime for an individual to consume. So it's kind of like, there's information that's out there, and you may have heard it before. It just didn't have a context. Now you heard it.
It wasn't called the OODA Loop, which sounds like something Willy Wonka made, but I do love it. I absolutely love it. That's very cool.
You could call it the Willy Wonka Loop.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I wouldn't be offended by that.
So, okay. Well, look, I guess the next part of this discussion would be what happened. People are scared.
Yep.
We use the OODA Loop, and then where do we wind up?
Yeah.
Where do we go?
So, and that's where it depends on every individual. But what I resort to is today, this day and age, there are more opportunities than ever. More opportunities to have a career that's fulfilling, opportunities to have education for free. I mean, there is so much education online that can completely change your life, right? But it's looking at the time you have during the day and balancing it and allocating it in the most productive way possible. Where do most people choose? They choose the television and Facebook and social media. But there is so much out there to consume that can completely shift your paradigm, your perspective of life, and totally change the direction of it. But most people are not necessarily, they're stuck. They're subjective. This is my life. This is the way that it is, and I am unwilling to change. And that's human nature. I mean, that's human nature. Right?
People are very habitual and they're very panicky.
Yep, that's the majority of our life is habit and subconscious.
Yeah.
Right. We get into these grooves. It works, and are basically, because our conscious can only absorb so much information, right? It resorts to whatever those habits are to dictate our life. So you don't pay attention to new things, to changing. But is this the advice that you would give somebody? Maybe that's a millennial that's out protesting in the street. I mean, what would you tell that man or woman? I would say to anyone, really. I think it's age agnostic at this point. Now, if you get into your 80s and 90s, yeah, maybe, but even like in their 70s, there's so many people, there's so many things that 70-year-olds have in relation to knowledge about life, knowledge about relationships, knowledge about what's important, right? Where they can take who they are and their talents and their abilities and
apply that
in something, right? But with a millennial, I would say with the millennials is they have experienced such a different growing up than anybody in history.
The most different in human history, I think.
And I think it's really it's reverse engineering what their life is like and what it took to get there, whether it's the technology, whether it's communication. I think studying history will give them a context as opposed to just having kind of their, tunnel vision as far as what life is.
It does get me up on my soapbox a little bit, but I think if more young people would study history, which I don't think they do enough of, I think there would be a lot less panic in the street. Honestly,
I totally agree, and I also think it's getting acclimated to disruption because they don't mind disruption, right? When the Apple software goes from the iOS 9 to 10, it's not like they're they're excited. Like they're freaking out. They're like, okay, cool.
Let's see what it is.
That's life, right? Yeah. That's life in all respects. It is going to change so fast, and so getting attached to, well, Hillary, she's the best thing in my life is going to be better because of her. No outside circumstance or experience is going to is not going to create any semblance of long-term happiness for you or fulfillment. Right. It's all going to be based on what goes on inside. Okay, and you're the one that's captaining your destiny, not some outside force. Because the outside force, even if it was Hillary, or even it was Obama, people. I mean, I remember 8 years ago, people were like, "The world's going to change, and everything's going to be amazing now." And we have this guy, and he did some things, and he reneged on a lot of promises.
He sucked.
Right?
Let's be honest, Pat. He sucked.
And again, that's what happens,
Yeah.
right, with people,
Right.
right? And that's just the nature. There is no like, overlord that can just like is a perfect person that's going to create a utopia for it. It's just never going to happen.
No, you know what I tell people? There's two things here. Number one, money makes life very easy. It doesn't solve any problems, but it makes you dealing with your problems easier. If you make your own money, if you find ways to generate more revenue, you can overpower any political ramification anywhere.
Yep.
Money fixes that. Your own personal income fixes that, first and foremost. If I'm consulting Donald Trump, the first thing I would tell him is, hey, look, get off the wall, get away from a lot of the social stuff. And the minute people's lives start turning financially, the minute they have more money, they have more expendable income in their pocketbooks, the quieter everybody's going to get. So if you act fast, and you act fast in terms of the economy and jobs, in 6 months to a year, the world is going to be a much different place, and a lot of these issues are going to be completely forgotten. Then worry about the wall.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your time, and we will definitely be back next week, right before Thanksgiving. So stay tuned.
You've been listening to the Wealth Standard Radio Show, your gold standard in everything financial.